It's a nice sunny day when the commercial plane WW2 starts its flight from Dallas to London with pilots William and Daniel. The journey gets off to a pleasant start, but shortly after, the flight instruments start acting strangely. William calls ground control for help, but they are told that the skies are clear and they should keep going. The pilots only get a second of relief because suddenly they see a huge storm right in front of them. Yet ground control is sure that the storm wasn't there 5 seconds ago. They have no choice but to fly right through it, so William informs the passengers that they will be going through some turbulence. The plane starts shaking like crazy as the pilots fly it through the raging storm, which suspiciously glows as they pass through it. Soon the plane stabilizes and flies normally again, but the pilots are shocked to discover that the skies are completely dark, as if night suddenly arrived in seconds. William tries to reassure the passengers by telling them this is only a humorous phenomenon that occurs when flying above the Bermuda Triangle. When the passengers discover their computers and phones aren't connected, they start to panic anyway. The majority of the flight instruments in the cabin are also down, and William is unable to communicate with ground control. However, the pilots believe that the radar is still functional enough to continue operating for the time being. In the meantime, the flight attendants distribute refreshments and reassure everyone that the turbulence was typical. Cameron strikes up a conversation with two men who just so happen to be historians, and finds out they are on their way to London to examine some freshly uncovered military artifacts. An elderly man is also recording everything that occurs to him in his notebook. It's concerning that the pilots can't see any other aircraft on their radar after a short while, as this could indicate the storm drove them off track. Even after descending, they are unable to identify any location, so William chooses to fly the aircraft in a loop in an attempt to locate someone. Suddenly, something appears on their radar, and at first they think it's a storm, but the truth is more disturbing. It's a bunch of fighter planes bombarding a city as if they were at war. The passengers immediately start panicking as they see buildings blowing up under the plane and fire all over the area, but the historians can't help noticing something curious. The pilots have no idea of what to do, but before they can discuss options, they suddenly see some fighter planes surrounding them. These fighters are ready to open fire on them, but thanks to the radar, the pilots manage to quickly fly the plane away from them and go higher in the sky. As the passengers grow agitated and insist on explanations, Cameron tries her best to reassure them. When threatening to tie him up, another flight attendant persuades Michael to behave when he acts excessively disrespectful and belligerent, even going so far as to grab Cameron. William chooses to descend once more in an attempt to locate them. After attempting in vain to get in touch with ground control, Daniel is first concerned that they might come under attack once more, but William reminds him that they are running low on gasoline and that they must find a quick solution. Unaware that Michael is following them and listening in on their chat, the historians persuade Cameron to accompany them to visit the pilots at that very moment, suggesting that they might know something. The historians tell the pilots the fighter planes they just saw haven't been made since 1945 and belong to the Luftwaffe, the Nazi Air Force. William doesn't take them seriously and tries to kick them out, but the historians guess that the plane has lost all signals, so William decides to give them a chance. The historians theorize that the plane has traveled back to 1940 and they now are in the middle of World War II, and if they were brought here by an anomaly, then they must find another one that can send them back. The idea of time traveling still sounds stupid to William, so he sends them back to their seats and asks them not to tell anyone about their crazy theory. Michael also rushes back to his seat before they can see him, and when Cameron passes by, he tries grabbing her again, but Cameron gets intimating enough to make him let go. After she's gone, Michael begins keeping a close ear on the historians behind him, who are using their books and calculations to try to figure things out. Afterward, the pilots go down again to search for any radio signals. Fortunately, this time they are successful and get in contact with a British soldier called Nigel, who thinks they are spies messing with him because it's impossible to catch a radio signal from a plane flying that high. The pilots beg for help, and when Nigel continues to be confused, William asks for the date, causing Nigel to confirm the historian's theory. They are on June 17, 1940. They attempt to persuade Nigel of their circumstances, but it is clear that they are absurd. Fortunately, the historians return to the cabin with further information, and they are able to speak with Nigel. Nigel is shocked to learn that they have estimated their location and that they passed the place of the British ship Lancastria's sinking, as the ship is believed to be still in service. Nigel makes a commitment to call back and resolves to ask his supervisor if the ship's narrative is accurate. Michael borrows the historian's books while they are gone and eventually connects the dots. Furious, he stands up and tells the other passengers what's going on, saying they could kill Hitler and stop World War II using the information from the book. Most passengers don't take him seriously and laugh at him, but a couple of guys do believe him and agree to help him hijack the cockpit. Luckily, there are 2 American soldiers traveling on this flight too, and they quickly cut in, explaining hijacking a cockpit counts as terrorism, no matter their intentions. This triggers a fight that flight attendants join, and after a few hits are exchanged, the soldiers manage to overpower the hijackers and send them back to their seats before threatening everyone else into behaving. Minutes later, Nigel gets in contact with them and confirms that their information about Lancastria was right. In fact, their intel helped them rescue a lot of people, so now Nigel trusts them. However, he also mentions a few missions that have gone differently from what the historians know about the war, which means they are in an alternate version of the past. Nigel is ready to help them land the plane, but first they need to know their exact location. Sadly, William and the historians can only offer a rough estimate. Daniel turns on their lights so they can be seen by the British soldiers. However, the Germans are spying on their conversation and send out orders. Soon, a bunch of fighter planes surround them to immediately open fire, so after turning off the lights, William uses his piloting experience to dodge all the bullets while all the passengers scream in fear. When the bullets become too much to handle, he suddenly drops the plane, letting it fall for a few seconds only to take it back up right before it hits the ground. The Germans follow him, but their old planes don't have the same steering capabilities and most of them crash to the ground. Unfortunately, 2 planes survive and shoot at the cabin, hurting Daniel and leaving a few holes in the plane. While William successfully FLIs them out of enemy reach, the flight attendants rush in to plug the holes and use their first aid knowledge to patch Daniel up. William is getting worried over the lack of fuel and the fact the shots damage their landing wheels. He also can't get in contact with Nigel, so Cameron convinces him to talk to the passengers to work together. Meanwhile, a superior tells Nigel that if he doesn't get news from his mysterious friends soon, they'll blow up the plane before it falls into the hands of the Germans. After leaving Daniel at the controls, William goes to talk to the passengers to finally confess the truth. He explains that he's trying his best to land the plane, but the recent attack damaged the landing wheel, so he will need help fixing it. Teresa reveals she's an engineer and accepts to come, inspiring a handyman called Hector to volunteer as well. William takes his new team to the plane's tail, and thankfully Teresa manages to find the problem quickly, so she begins fixing it with Hector's help. When she's done, she manages to open the door, yet the wheel won't come down because there's something stuck on it. William volunteers to go down, but Hector says the captain is needed to fly the plane, so he'll do it instead. Hector carefully climbs on the landing wheel and uses a hammer to fix the issue. The wheel immediately begins moving and Hector has to hang on tight not to fall, but thankfully the wheel comes back up without anyone getting hurt. William rushes back to the cabin and with Daniel's help, they fly lower to get a radio signal again. They let Nigel know that they must land right away because they only have 80 minutes of fuel left. As they are speaking, 2 German planes return and launch an attack. This time, they launch a missile, but it explodes too near and obliterates every window in the aircraft. William utilizes the radar to track the enemy while the passengers are in a panic. This allows him to do some wild movements that lead to the German planes colliding with one another. The historians then have an idea. They ought to take out the plane's radar and give it to Nigel so he can use it to direct them to a secure location. It doesn't make sense that they don't have this technology yet, so maybe the plane was sent to the past to fix that issue. At that moment, a missile hits a turbine, so the plane starts falling at great speed. After a few failed tries, the pilots get it to work again and manage to get in contact with Nigel to agree on a location to drop the radar. Then it's revealed the missile came from the British, but Nigel tells his superior to stop the fire and go pick up the radar. On the plane, everyone works together to make the package. The old man reveals he bought some toy parachutes for his grandkids and donates them to the cause, and a few passengers hand in their USB batteries. Then they wrap the radar up in a bunch of clothes and a bag and connect it to the parachutes. They quickly inform Nigel about it after they get to the proper location and hurl it from the plane, but sadly, the Nazis hear about it too and show up first. A couple British Army soldiers arrive as the German soldier starts climbing a tree to get to the parcel, and a shootout breaks out. Thankfully, the British are in control and they murder every German one by one to successfully recover the cargo. More Nazi planes are dispatched to pursue William's aircraft, and on this occasion, one of them is fired on the side, opening a large hole that allows a few passengers to fall through. The plane is shaking quite badly, but William once again pulls a crazy move to guide the plane away from danger. As soon as Nigel receives the radar, he sets it up and starts guiding William to fly in the right direction, although the Nazis are catching up to them. When they are about to open fire, the British planes sent by Nigel arrive to fight back, so the commercial plane can keep flying safely. Suddenly, Nigel sees a large shadow on the radar that doesn't look like any kind of aircraft. And when the plane gets closer, they realize it is a storm that looks exactly like the one that brought them to this time period. It's a risky move, but since they don't have any fuel left anyway, William decides to fly through it and hopes it will send them back to the present. After saying goodbye to Nigel and telling the passengers to hold on, William and Daniel take the plane through the storm, and after lots of shaking, they are happy to see they are finally back in the present. It seems they are flying above Berlin, and luckily ground control immediately contacts them to offer them an empty runway to land on. The pilots push the plane to its limits and manage to land it safely. Relieved to be home, the passengers immediately get off the plane. When William leaves the cabin, he finds the old man still on his seat writing in his notebook, which has a map that looks like the route they just followed. When the old man closes this book, it's revealed his name is Nigel, meaning this is the guy who saved them back in 1940.